Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for engaging trail users through interactive mapping with TERRAIN360. My name is Kara. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program coordinator for Partnership for the National Trail System, or PNTS, and I will be serving as today's webinar moderator. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Onondaga and Haudenosaunee people. PNTS recognizes that land acknowledgements are an important first step in acknowledging that we are on stolen Indigenous lands. In just a moment, I'll put a link into the chat where you can explore what native lands you reside on. Please introduce yourself into the chat and let us know what organization you're affiliated with as well. PNTS recognizes the need to commit further and engage in meaningful partnerships. PNTS is committed to working with Indigenous people, organizations, and communities, and having Indigenous people lead the way through initiatives such as our Tribal Consultation webinar series that just wrapped up. Our commitment proceeds into the future through projects such as our Indigenous Mapping and Research Project, which provides resources to help advance National Trail System awareness and education of Indigenous knowledge and stewardship. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to everyone that registered following the live presentation. Today's session will go for about 1 hour, and we'll have time in between and at the end for Q&A. As we go, please put any questions or comments you have into the chat. For those of you who may not be familiar with PNTS, we are a small nonprofit that's a collective voice, a resource provider, and a hub for exchange, learning, and action for the National Trail System. As the only 501c3 focused on the 30 national scenic and historic trails, PNTS brings together professionals, leaders, and trail and hiking enthusiasts to promote a thriving, accessible, and inclusive national trail system. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter and owner of TERRAIN360, Ryan Abrahamson. And now I'll hand it off to Ryan to get us started for today.
Thanks, Kara. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I want to wait about 15 seconds to kind of introduce myself before people come into the waiting room. But I'm Ryan Abrahamson with TERRAIN360. I started the company back in 2012, and today I'm going to take everyone on a journey of what TERRAIN360 is, what we're doing, and some of the cool projects we're working on with some trail partners all across the country. So I'm going to start with the introduction and history. I'm going to go through how we started, why we started. We're going to talk about some of the key projects that we're working on. And I think I mentioned to Kara earlier, if there's a question, just post it at any time in the chat, and then Kara will interrupt with, with that question, because I can't actually see the chats. I'm on Zoom and doing a presentation. So just Carol, interrupt if you have questions. If I talk too fast, I'm going to slow down. That's no problem. Sometimes I do talk too fast. Anyway, here we go. So I started TERRAIN360 back in 2012. Actually, I was exploring Google Street View, and I was like, this is missing and lacking actual hiking trails and biking trails and cool outdoor things. I've always loved the outdoors. I grew up in Minnesota overlooking the Mississippi River. And I thought, man, how cool would it be to do what Google is doing with Street View and do this for the great outdoors? And so in 2012, after 6 months of trial and error, trying to figure out how to take really beautiful panoramic imagery and put it on a website, we started TERRAIN360. And this is one of the first panos ever taken from a company. It's kind of ugly. The map is all over the place. This is in Richmond, Virginia. It's local. It's where I live. It's a small park here in Richmond, but it's one of our very first Street View style imagery of a park. And it turned out, it was okay. It was good in the beginning. It's a little dark photography, but that's okay. We kind of grew a little bit more, started trying to figure out how to take the highest resolution imagery possible. I think this is a pun, but I'm not quite sure. Capturing the natural world in the best light. I think that's the kind of the concept we're trying to do. But I wanted to take beautiful photography and not just do I guess a GoPro style, but take high-end DSLR cameras and, stitch the imagery together, give it a lat long, and then plot it and put it onto a website. So I think we accomplished that. This is one of the first single track trails we mapped out. It's the Buttermilk Trail here in Richmond. The other thing too, I wanted to make sure ease of use was a primary thing for the website. Simple and clean user experience, design, easy to use, to get yourself immersed. Anybody can kind of be involved. A lot of map products are really more for the geospatially aware kind of people, and I wanted to make this kind of a clean experience for people. So fast forward, we spent on the first 2 years kind of pro bono working for, different national parks, capturing beautiful locations. This is an example of Acadia. I literally sent a group of guys, said, look, we need to go get some big stuff and get out of Richmond and, get away from the small local hiking trails and go capture some beautiful national parks. So send them up to Acadia to capture, this is an example. And I think it looks pretty beautiful. And it was a long time ago, but it's definitely still pretty amazing, I think. So here's another example. This is Zion National Park, Angels Landing. And I wanted to kind of point out too, this is not only showcasing beautiful natural areas, but this is really a very hard trail to hike. And I think if there's a crazy permitting system, which is great because it keeps less people on the trail. But you can explore this from your house, which is pretty awesome. And if, some people might not have the ability to hike a trail or get up to this part of Zion National Park. And so here you could see it in beautiful, clean, crisp imagery. And by the way, I just wanted to point out too, and I'll get into the nitty gritty of how this works, but you can explore the entire length of the trail with TERRAIN360. This is just a snippet of one of the scenes. So a lot of people ask, what's our technology? I'm going to show you some river mapping technology, some land mapping technology. These are two of our boats that we use. As you can see, this on the right, Blackfoot River, Montana. That's one of my operators on the boat. He's got a camera rig on top of a raft going through some class 1s and 2s, maybe 3s, I think, on this river. This is on the left here is a pretty flat water river in Michigan, Shiawassee River, which is, beautiful, flat, lots of greenery, a lot of sandbars. And this is kind of a catamaran raft style that we have with all our gear on top. And I'll get into how the gear works in a minute. Here's two of our land-based. This is one of my guys who's working with me from the beginning. He's got backpack cameras, and this is actually the first model. The second model looks better than this. And then we have a trike, which is pretty cool. This is mapping out the Anacostia Riverwalk. You will notice it's a fat tire trike. That was unnecessary. It looks really cool though. So, but we can go anywhere, including snow, in this trike. But all the electronics are in batteries and power and computing is all part of this one single package, which is great. It's pretty versatile. And then of course on here on the left is one of our mapping boats recently. But in the camera arrays, we could store hundreds and thousands of images, gigabytes upon gigabytes of information. I also have a sensor suite on each one of these. You see a light sensor in the top, a little globe, and then I do barometric pressure, altimeter, air temp, water temp, humidity. Of course, lat long, of course, is recorded at the same time. So we have like a lot of extra data that sometimes isn't shown on the website, but we have it. We're storing it, so who knows what we could do with that in the future. So moving on, this is a more recent extension of our technology suite. We worked with the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service this past summer in Montana to map out a trail called the Old Buffalo Trail in Montana overlooking the Blackfoot River. A lot of indigenous sites along this trail. It was really important to capture this to kind of showcase this area. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. BLM was great, and they allow us to attach your camera to one of their new what are they called, UTVs, which you can see right here in this picture. So it was mounted at the center pole right between the two seats. And here's an example of what our cameras look like. So after we take all our imagery, we got to render it and get it onto the website. So we built a custom render pipeline using Amazon Web Services. We built a custom web platform, our own viewer. We don't use any third-party tools when it comes to this kind of thing. We built a beautiful, clean, easy to use viewer, works on mobile, works on desktop. It could integrate into any website. and I'll show examples of those later. We also built an API. We had a client who was like, hey, we want to put this in our app. The way to do that is with an API. So that's also part of the platform. And then sometimes we have client requests where they want raw imagery available for kind of a cold storage, I guess, repository of some of the original imagery for use later. And just for a little context here, this is one of our clients in Michigan, Southeastern Council of Governments, Southeastern Michigan Council of Governments, and they contracted us 2 years ago to map out literally all of the hiking trails, biking trails, and waterways in Southeastern Michigan. It was a massive project, so it required a lot of logistics to get this to happen. But this is an example of what some of the rail trails, and actually the Quendry Cut, just a little context, this is actually old rail trail. It's old railroad, and converted into a beautiful bike path in downtown Detroit. So we started land-based trails only, 2012, 2013. Single track mountain biking trails was one of the first things, and hiking. In Richmond, this is typically used for mountain biking. This trail right here, Buttermilk Trail, it's called. Moved on a little bit, rail as a trail, multi-use trails. We started adding those to our, I guess, our capabilities. This is High Bridge Trail in Virginia. And like I said, I started locally because it's local and it's cheaper, to kind of build a portfolio of trails. And then we branched out. This is the Appalachian Trail in Shenandoah National Park. And it's springtime, early spring, actually May, it's the AT. And, since it's only an hour and a half from where I'm at, it was like an obvious target to map out sections of it. And we ended up I paid 2 guys to go out there, and they got 500 miles of the Appalachian Trail. And, later I was like, wow, this is a cool job. I want to hike the Appalachian Trail, but I get paid for it. But they did a great job. It was tough, with camera gear and camping gear, etc. But this is back in 2013. I'd love to do it again, if possible, and capture the whole trail. Who knows? So 2013, at that point, hundreds of land-based trails mapped out, several high-profile trails, Zion, Acadia, Bryce, etc. These are more demo projects to kind of build kind of a rapport of what we can do. Photography is clean and clear. I think it looks beautiful. So kind of grew up a little bit. 2014, we ended up getting our first paid client, and it's actually a local organization called the James River Association. And the project was to map out the entire James River. It's 340 miles of waterway. And so we're going from mapping out, 10-mile trails, to a 340-mile long waterway. And when you get to the tidal section, it's so wide, you have to map out both sides of the shoreline. So it ended up being 450 miles. And we're taking imagery every 30 to 70 feet, depending on which of the river. So we ended up with a massive amount of data. And, we kind of had to deal with some of these data storage challenges, which include syncing the cameras with the GPS and capturing automatically instead of having a manual trigger. Weather and moisture is always an issue when you're on the water, more so than when you're under land. And of course, power requirements were an issue. We had solar power for a long time, but you'd have 4 or 5 days of cloudy weather and the batteries wouldn't charge. So this was a pretty amazing project. And James River Association still features it on the website, and they're a great partner. Here's kind of an overview of the map of anywhere in that blue line. If you click on it, it jumps to that section of the river. So we did 200,000 images, one 360-degree image every 30 to 50 feet, might be 30 to 70, just depends, like I said, on the width of the river and where we're going. But we also did capture 60 public access sites, so you could jump from the river to the boat ramp or the kayak put in, or the launch, and vice versa. So if you're going down the launch, you can jump into the river, which is pretty neat. And there's some other benefits to capturing public access sites. As a manager, a land manager, you can kind of look and see, okay, this concrete needs repair, or is this ADA compliant, or do people have issues with mud? Could this potentially be an issue down the road with, some problem? And also people are curious, general public who use the public access points would like to see, hey, let's check out this ramp. And that's a concrete ramp right there, so you can see pretty clearly. So great project. We had a great time. We did grow a lot. And then we ended up a year later working on a huge, massive project with the Chesapeake Conservancy and the Captain John Smith Chesapeake National Historic Trail. This was incredible. We ended up mapping all the rivers that pour into the Chesapeake Bay over 3 years. And it was phenomenal. This one here in the right, we're looking at here, is the first river we started with them in 2015, the Nanaco. Beautiful river in Delaware and in Maryland, I believe it shares both states. It goes cuts both states, but beautiful river. We worked through a lot of challenges with weather, with data storage. We introduced some automation with some of our tech platform. But this is really spectacular project. Potomac River, South Potomac River, Susquehanna, West Branch of the Susquehanna River, Nanaco, of course, the Rappahannock. On the right, you see at Siegel Lake, that's the headwaters of the Susquehanna River, way up by Cooperstown, New York. Beautiful blue aquamarine waters you can see there. Rappahannock, York, Patapsco, Patuxent, Pocomoke River, the Elk River, and the Sassafras. I might be missing one or two, but that is kind of the gist of it. It was fantastic to map those out. We did the Susquehanna and the West Branch Susquehanna in 2015, Potomac and the Rappahannock in 2016. Some of the other, I think Patuxent and Pocomoke in 2017. Great project. Ended up, so this is one of our major paid projects. And a lot of people ask, how do we fund this for a trail or trail group or whatever? And we actually ended up partnering with the Conservation Fund. They committed $250,000 over 3 years to map out all these waterways. I think they got a deal. I loved it. It was great. We ended up mapping 4,000 miles, and it had incredible press. The Chesapeake Conservancy is on the ball with getting press to write about projects like this. So 150 plus articles and press engagements. We currently, it's live now on their website, my website. We get 300,000 plus users per year visiting these digital maps and exploring the waterways of the Chesapeake Bay. I think eventually we'll probably remap some of these, so you're able to compare over time changes in shoreline, showing erosion, what it looked like, before and after flooding. So that's kind of the goal in the future, just to do a side-by-side comparison of the same waterway. Similar to how you do satellite imagery, you can see changes over time based on when a satellite passes by. This is more of a ground level, higher quality detailed concept is what we're thinking. So just to go back to the project funding, this is a nonprofit partner with another nonprofit to commit to the funding. And it just takes the right partner to make that happen for years and years of benefit, obviously. So moving on, 1.2 million images captured, 3,000 plus miles of shoreline, probably more than that. I think it might be close to 4,000. I haven't decided. I think I have to look at that up, but roughly that. 300 public access points. Susquehanna River alone had 156 public access points, probably more now. It's been a few years, but we mapped every single one. That in itself was a pretty major project. I had a guy just travel for a week through New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, capturing all those. Plus we did the West Branch of the Susquehanna River too, which I think has like 30 or 40 alone on that one river. And then we ended up total 50 million data points. And that's including the other data we capture, barometric pressure. We had a LiDAR unit on board some of these locations just to kind of see what that would look like capturing LiDAR. It's difficult to work with LiDAR, so we kind of can that after a while, but we have that data, which is pretty fantastic, I think. So great projects. A lot of press written about us. Seattle Times, I don't even know how they got a hold of this, but I think the AP picked it up. But again, press is huge, helps fundraising, and we don't chase after press as much now, but this was a fun time and an exciting project, no question. And by the way, this picture of this castle is actually called a Siegel Castle. It's actually literally like built on the Lake Otsego, which is kind of cool. It's like a random thing. And it's actually, if you look at it, it's in our virtual tour, so you can kind of see it from the water. So cool. So 2020 comes. Everyone remembers 2020 and how great of a year that was. We ended up I was like, well, I'd like to stay in business, and I'd like to do a project where I don't have to be around people. And so we selected Tangier Island as a with a Chesapeake Conservancy as a partner, paying partner, to map out Tangier for several reasons. Tangier is disappearing and it's sinking into the bay. The water levels are rising, and it's, it's a beautiful, beautiful area. And I was like, well, it's pretty remote and we won't be near people. So let's capture Tangier Island, all the streets and the shoreline. And there's a second part of the island north of the town that actually used to be a town. We mapped that too. So, I encourage everyone after this to kind of Google Tangier Island to kind of get an idea of what, the challenges it faces. It is definitely disappearing. It's 6 inches above sea level. The average, I think the mean sea level. But, it's mostly flooded all year round. It's pretty wild. Here's an example of some of the challenges, technical challenges, logistical getting across. We have our boat on a fishing boat, crabber boat, and then he had to, lug us across the bay, basically to Tangier Island. And this was like gale force winds. I don't know if gale force is the right. I don't think we would have gone, but it was unbelievable. He's scared. My guy is scared in that picture, in that video. But here's the boat on the back of the crab boat, loaded up, and here it is in the sand, finally at Tangier. So I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's at most risk from rising sea levels, due to disappear in less than 50 years. We did a comprehensive mapping, roads, trails, and shoreline. As you can see from the video, I walked all the streets. We did the entire shoreline all around the entire island. There's a few hiking trails along the beach, but it's, like you see from that map, it's definitely pretty comprehensive. Some of the shoreline we could map in the northern part of the island due to being super shallow, but as you can see, the fishing houses / boats are on stilts. There's the island right there. One unique fact about Tangier Island, they have their own unique dialect, English dialect from the old Victorian era, which is pretty fascinating to hear. So some of the objectives, digital preservation was number one. We have a very comprehensive scene by scene, every 10-foot intervals, documentation of the entire island, including all the streets, roads, etc. It's a historical documentation, and I feel like it will educate people about climate change who may, not know anything about it or are questioning the fact that climate change is happening. And then there's we're planning going back in 5 years to do kind of like a chronological comparison, what it looks like 5 years later, including the same exact routes if we can, if not underwater. So that's the plan. 2025, we'll go back. And what's cool about capturing this data, then we have a record in 2020 of this island. So, if anything happens, a hurricane or a giant storm, we have the digital records. There's always satellite imagery, but now we have, if you were actually a person walking through the streets and seeing what it looked like at that moment in time. So that project alone helped me get through 2020 and all the challenges that year had. So now this leads to look at the clock, right on time. One of the most amazing projects I've been part of actually in my life is the mapping of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. I actually was originally proposed by their geographer, the National Park Unit's geographer, Ryan Cooper, back in 2016. We were together at some kind of trail, I don't know, something, back in 2016, talking about the Chesapeake Conservancy project. And, he had mentioned, possibility of mapping out the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. And so fast forward 5 years, that's how long it took to make this happen. In 2021, I proposed a demo project with them, for a very small amount of money, to what would happen if I traveled out, out to Montana and Idaho and part of Nebraska and map out the sections of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. And so a project was born from that idea. And the way it's going right now is planning on mapping all 4,900 miles of trails. Most of it's water. There's a lot of hiking trails and points of historical buildings and multi-use trails. And, like this is an indigenous a park that we just mapped there. And so the goal is to map it all. And 2020 was a demo, and I'll go to our work in 2022, what we've done with them, which is pretty amazing. But the project will end up with over 3 million high resolution 360 images. We're going to integrate it into tourism websites. The Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail has their own tourism website, lewisandclark.travel, and we're already integrating into that. But local tourism groups can integrate this exploration tool into their websites, apps if they wanted to. And this is really cool. One of the neat things of this is actually we can follow some of the journals, Lewis and Clark, and integrate some of their data they collected within the virtual tour. So if they observed, plants or animals or campsites that they stopped at, we plug that into this so you can explore, like, this is where they camped, this is a flower they observed, or, and something that no longer exists in that site. That we can plug into that tour. So it becomes an educational tool as well, historical education tool, and you actually be able to see it, which is neat. Project objectives: comprehensive digital record of the trail. Like our past work, it's capturing as much and high detail of the entire trail as possible. That's overlooking the Missouri River. As you can see, we've hiked along the shoreline. We actually mapped the actual waterway itself last year. There's future science applications. We have a machine learning tool on here. It's actually not machine learning. It already has learned. It's an object detection tool that will tell you what's in the picture. So we use this for two reasons. One, I can kind of catalog what's in the picture. Two, it's ADA compliant. Somebody who's blind can know what's in the actual image, and you turn the direction, it'll tell you what's in that image, which is really neat. So you don't have to, you can be visually impaired and be able to use this. So it basically shows every object within every scene, every direction for an entire length of a trail. So if you're going down the trail, it'll tell you what objects are in there within certain confidence. It's the confidence levels. It's an AI, so or a machine learning model that we use to kind of basically looks at imagery and kind of tells you what's in that image, which is pretty neat. So all types of people can enjoy these virtual tours. One of the big things that we focused on a little bit last year and this year is the Snake River dam removal projects. We mapped out some of the snake, and I feel like this tool can be used for policymaker advocacy, kind of educating policymakers on, this is what it looks like ground level when, the dams are, have backed up and flooded this canyon. They get to see it firsthand, entire lengths or segments of a river. Or, this could apply to a trail as well. And incidentally, we're actually going to map out sections of the Klamath River in California in April, prior to dam removal and post dam removal, to kind of show before and after what that river looked like before dam removal and after, to kind of get an idea, educate people. We do not want dams, and we want rivers to stay natural and awesome. And this is what it looked like before dams, to kind of give people an idea. So policymaker advocacy is huge, I think, in some of these projects. Digital access for those who are physically unable to see the trail. This is Big Bone Lick Visitor Center in Kentucky. It's a beautiful state park. A lot of history in this park. They found quite a few, I don't know how to call them, not dinosaur bones, but like prehistoric skeletons in this park. And it's amazing. This allows people to be able to see inside this the visitor center without actually having to go. And this applies to everywhere. You can see, segments of the trail that you would never be able to visit normally. So this is a Big Bone Lick. I missed education, but this is an example. I'm sure everyone here has heard of the Yellowstone River flooding back earlier this summer. So we actually mapped out a segment of the Yellowstone right outside of the park in Montana. And this can kind of give you an idea of the erosion that's happened. That the whole shelf right there is just, collapsed into the water during the flooding. So we did, I think, 10 miles of this segment of the Yellowstone, and to me, it's a great way of communicating to people the devastation outside of news reports. You get to travel along a waterway or a trail and kind of see exactly what it looks like pre and post flooding. So the objectives of this project: comprehensive digital record of the trail, future science applications, policymaker advocacy, digital access for those who are unable to see the trail, environmental advocacy, and then indigenous site imagery. This is the Old Buffalo Trail. I mentioned this before. The Bureau of Land Management partnered with us and the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail to map a segment of it's actually an old rail trail, but before that, it was an old indigenous trail that went along the Blackfoot River, and there are a significant amount of sites, historical sites, indigenous historical sites along this, and some we couldn't photograph. They're still being examined, but a lot of segments we were able to map out here. So we ended up using. I put this video on here to show the difficulty in some of these trails. That this is a UTV, and a landslide happened like literally 2 days before we got there. Some rocks had blocked the trail, so we're trying to get around it. But we captured, I think, I want to say 20 miles. I might be wrong on that, but it was an absolute beautiful stretch of old rail trail. And it's being developed not in a sense of building construction, but to make an actual really nice public access site where people can explore that segment of the Blackfoot River up on a rail trail. So it goes all the way into Bonner, Montana. I think it's like 40 miles long, but it's beautiful. So 2021, 2022 mapping to date with Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. We had a pretty huge project this summer on the Ohio River. I'll get more to that in a second. Mapping the Ohio, which is part of the Lewis and Clark Trail, from Ashland, Kentucky to Cairo, Illinois, 740 miles. I might be wrong on that number. It's close, but we took a significant amount of imagery. I mean, just massive. I ended up actually spacing out the distance in between sets of images to a little closer in. So we have a very, very rich data set to pull from, but you can see here, this is going through Cincinnati. And we focused on river left. The river's wide enough to where if we did it, we would have to probably end up doing both sides because it's so wide. We focused on the Kentucky border side. And then we went back to Montana, did the Blackfoot River, more of the Missouri breaks, and I can get that in a minute. Yellowstone River, Missouri River, Nebraska, and Snake River in Washington State, as well as a significant number of land-based trails along the Ohio River, 40 plus indigenous historically important sites in Montana and Idaho in the past 2 years, including a segment of the Lolo Trail, which is really pretty cool. I'll show that here in a minute. One cool aspect of this project is we've actually partnered with the National Park Service and the Lewis and Clark Foundation to work with some of the interns and get interns an opportunity to help in content, geotagging some historical locations within the 360 environment, tagging historical flora fauna observations, tourism website integration. There's some content cleanup needs to happen in some of these trails. And then we sent one of the interns, Morgan Scafini, to Montana and to do some infield mapping. So she was able to map out 18 segments of the Lewis and Clark Trail on land and part of the Continental Divide. Really just beautiful imagery along that she came home with. Really cool experience. She wrote a great journal entry on it. I think it's on a website somewhere on the Lewis and Clark National Park Service website. So one of the big questions: how did this get funded? The big part of this project was the Ohio River, and the Lewis and Clark Trust, based in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, partnered with National Park Service to provide funding to map out the Ohio River. And it was an absolutely great project, a lot of fun. Lewis and Clark Trust was a great partner. They identified some undesignated tourism dollars in Kentucky. Funding was used to map the Ohio River left along the Kentucky state line from Ashland to Cairo. And the funding was able to be stretched to allow us to actually mapped more than we were contracted to. I am a huge advocate of doing this not to make money, but because I have a huge passion in this. I love it, and I want to. How can we stretch these dollars to be able to do more with what we're given? And so we basically, I think we doubled the size of what we were originally proposed to do, and just kept going along the Ohio to get it mapped out. But Lewis and Clark Trust is a great partner on this project, and we have long-term partner is the way I call it. So it's pretty exciting, and this also allowed us to go to Montana, or the flexibility, not the actual dollars, to go to do some other parts along the trail. But one of the benefits of this is partnering with a local organization like Lewis and Clark Trust, brings together organizations and towns along the Ohio River. I had some great times, and I'll say Big Bone State Park was awesome. We visited a lot of towns. One of the ones that stick out in my mind is West Point, Kentucky, a beautiful little town in the Ohio River, a lot of history, and we've mapped their town. We took a lot of pictures along the shoreline there. And then of course, met with the locals, and they'll be able to share this imagery of their town and some of the historical sites within their regional tourism office, within their, their town website. That was awesome. So, this isn't live yet. It will be in the next couple of weeks, but this segment of the Ohio River is really great, and I'm sure more and more towns will be utilizing this imagery soon. We haven't officially launched it. It's definitely live on our website, major segments of it, but this will be really exciting to share with other groups, and we will rely on Lewis and Clark Trust to kind of promote that. So it's great to have a nonprofit partner to be able to do this. This is some of the pictures in New Albany, Indiana, right across. It's right down from Louisville. Here's our boat. Cameras on top of the boat. This is a little story. We had a guy who we were getting this boat set up, and a guy was backing his boat down the ramp, didn't secure it on the trailer. The boat fell off the trailer. So we had to try to figure out how to lug a 1,000-pound boat back up on a trailer. So that was helping the locals. That's what we were doing in that project. That was a lot of fun. So dissemination, where does this live? We integrated into the Lewis and Clark travel geotourism website. Ability to embed in any website, really. Of course, I mentioned before, we have an API access for app-based platforms. We have a whole SDK app development kit for TERRAIN360, or it's just simply embedding the YouTube video. You can embed it onto your website. So we wanted to make it easy to share. And of course, it lives on terrain360.com. But this is a Slaughter River on the Missouri Breaks, embedded into the Lewis and Clark travel website. So wrapping it up, how to get involved. A lot of people ask, how do we get, our location mapped out? So I guess I would identify trails or trail segments that have high cultural, environmental, historical value. This trail right here is a Lolo trail on the right. I did a small segment of it as a demo, and I think it looks like we're going to be mapping out the entire, 112-mile segments. Very important, trail in the Montana-Idaho region, used by indigenous peoples for over 12,000 years. Lewis and Clark specifically wrote about it in their journal, and how it was almost like a super highway crossing over the mountains. So that'll be a lot of fun. Amazing trail to map out. And then identifying potential funding partners that could be in these pictures don't match what this is, but I'll explain those in a second. Funding partners could be anybody from a nonprofit advocacy group like the Lewis and Clark Trust, or federal partners. I'll explain how that works in a minute. But these pictures are from the Tuolumne River last summer. And this is a Forest Service patrol boat, oarsman Dan Menton, who's actually one of the top paddlers, I think, in all West Coast. But he guided my camera gear and camera through Class 5+ rapids on the Tuolumne River. This is called Clavey Falls, but that was a fantastic project. The imagery is on the website, looks incredible. But we partnered with the Forest Service on this project to map this out, and they were a great partner. And then we work with local or regional foundations. So this is an example of a great partnership with public and private partners. I'll go back to that real quick. The National Marine Sanctuary Foundation has partnered with NOAA's National Marine Sanctuary Unit to help us basically map out Mallows Bay National Marine Sanctuary in ultra high resolution detail, very, very detailed. Mallows Bay, if you don't know, is filled with I think over 200 shipwrecks spanning from the 1700s all the way to the 1960s, and they're slowly eroding away and going away. But we went through several times actually, so you can kind of see the chronological differences in time. Mapped all the shipwrecks in the Mallows Bay area, a lot of the hiking trails, and then we're integrating, not only creating a beautiful virtual tour and virtual digital paddle guide, if you will, we're integrating iNaturalist data within the actual 360-degree space, so you can see plants and animals that have been identified by people who are part of iNaturalist. So it's a pretty amazing project. But the funding came from NOAA through the National Marine Sanctuary. They were the partner that kind of managed the whole project. We were able to do some really great work with that funding mechanism. And then that's it. Questions? I put this up because it's kind of cool. It's part of the Alice Creek in Montana, part of the Continental Divide Trail, CDT, which I thought was pretty neat. So I'm open to questions.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We do have a question in the chat. Is it possible to create information points within the map where people can access interpretive information?
Yes.
Yes, there's like a second part. I understand people can see existing signs or exhibits, but I'm talking more about something built within the system where there might be like a pin where people can click on to learn more.
Yes, absolutely. So we have, I'd show you right now, but I want to keep this up because it's, it's a little more complicated. But yes, you can add what we call hotspots within a scene. For example, we're looking at this right here. We wanted to tag, I don't know, something in the mountain here on the right. You could add a little pin to it, click on it. It has tons of information. You got an image gallery in there, YouTube video. In the National Marine Sanctuary, Mallows Bay, we actually have audio recordings from people who were actually on the shipwrecks at one point, and we did like audio interviews with them. You can play that while you're exploring the shipwrecks in the 3D space. So there's a lot of capabilities for for exactly that, for information within the actual virtual sphere. And I can demo that. If you want to email me directly, I can show how that works.
Awesome, thanks. We don't have any more questions in the chat yet, but I'm going to unmute everyone. And if you would like to ask Ryan a question verbally, we do have a smaller group, so please just raise your hand and happy to call on you if you want to ask verbally rather than in the chat. And I know we have Jim Mallory here. I don't know, Jim, if you are interested in saying a few words about your experience.
Kara, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, glad to see so many on this webinar this afternoon. Let me vouch for Ryan, but I must qualify this before I start. We have no agency relationship with TERRAIN360 whatsoever, either personally or through the Lewis and Clark Trust. And Ryan was brought to us by our trail partner, the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. So far, we've only had one problem with Ryan, and I think you've encountered that this afternoon. If we could just get Ryan to be a little more enthusiastic about what he does, it'd be great. All jokes aside, the man is for real. TERRAIN360 is for real. And when he said we like to go above and beyond, we like to deliver more than promised, they do. They truly do deliver more than promised. This is not a come on. This is not a pitch, just to get you involved. Lewis and Clark are Clark National Historic Trail to help with this project this year. They did not have budgeted money for any more projects. I think all of us can appreciate that when we deal with federal agencies. We had to scramble. We scrambled and found money to get ourselves involved with it. We didn't have money budgeted for it either. And in 3 or 4 weeks, we did find some money and got it started. But Ryan has been perfect, delightful, and a real professional to work with. 2 things that got our attention on it. It's obvious that it's scientifically important to define the trail with pictures. This is the scientific portion of it. It's a baseline for future work that needs to be done on a trail. A picture's worth 1,000 words, as the old adage says. Well, when you go to someone for funding, if you've got pictures, you've got a real strong hand to play in getting the funds or the money you need for that partner. And the second part of it is there are literally, and I hate to go into this, but there are literally hundreds of people in this country that are no longer able to get out on a trail. Physically, they can't do it. They're experiencing the same things that I'm personally experiencing, hip problems, knee problems. They're not going to be able to get out on the trail, but they can enjoy the trail. They can see the advantages of the trail, sitting at home, looking at a monitor. That portion of it alone is very important. We have seen so many people become enthusiastic about protecting the trail simply through TERRAIN360's pictures. I'd be happy to take questions myself, and I think most of you have my address. Kara has my address, so there's no secrets about us. We're out here to help promote trails. Thanks, Kara.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim.
If I may add, this is Larry
Yeah,
Calhoun.
yeah.
I work for
Larry.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I can say that we appreciate the work that the TERRAIN360 and Ryan has done for us, and we're looking forward to mapping the complete Lewis and Clark Trail. The other thing, it also provides a different perspective. 90% of the people are not going to be looking from the river inward. They're going to be looking outward into the river. So it gives a different perspective of actually what Lewis and Clark experienced by sailing down the river. So that was kind of a neat thought of how, what work is going on with the trail. And to reiterate Jim, thoughts, also the historic value, some of with the climate change and all, a lot of the areas will be underwater in the future, and the documentation of the shorelines and all is extremely important as well. Over.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Anyone have any other questions or comments for Ryan? If you're thinking about a potential project, definitely can throw that out there to Ryan to get some initial thoughts. You're welcome to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. All right, awesome. If nobody has anything else, I think we can wrap up. Ryan, do you want to say anything else before we wrap up?
Yeah, Kara, thank you for this opportunity. Just to kind of present what we're doing with Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. Yeah, this has been great. And if anybody has any questions outside of this, you can email me, email Kara, email Jim Mallory or Larry Calhoun, two guys who spoke earlier. But yeah, it's been a great opportunity. I love what I do, and just it's super exciting to bring the natural world, captured digitally, and preserved forever. That's the way I look at it. So anyway, thanks everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Yeah. And before we wrap up quickly, I just want to remind everyone that the National Trails Workshop is fast approaching. This exciting event will be November 2nd through 4th in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It'll be 3 days of learning, collaboration, and networking amongst seasoned trails professionals, emerging leaders, and people who are interested in getting involved with trails in their communities. So please visit our workshop website on the PNTS website to register for that awesome event. And like Ryan said, if you have any additional questions or would like to get in touch with Ryan, I will send out his contact information in the post email along with the recording. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much again, Ryan.
Thank you.